My name is Daniela Pirraglia. I'm an associate registrar at Innis College, and I'm also our financial aid advisor. And I'm here to talk to you all about money. So I have an agenda on the screen right now. Basically, we're going to start like big picture, and then we're going to get a little bit more narrow into the more specifics around like making payments and what resources might be available to you, and payment deadlines and all that kind of stuff. If you have questions, I'm happy to take questions during the presentation. We can also, there's a bit of time at the end for questions. So whatever your comfort level is, happy to take your questions. And if you have like a very specific personal question, you can also, I can take questions right after this if you're more comfortable with that, or you can also email me. Okay, so on the screen, I have our 2025-2026 tuition fees for students entering year one. The only detail I want to draw your attention to is the full-time incidentals are last year's incidentals. The 2025-2026 details haven't been published yet for the incidentals. The numbers will be relatively similar. It will be a small increase, maybe a couple $100 or something along those lines. But yes, these are the fees. There's the program fee and the course fees. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk about the difference between those two types of fees. So all students are initially charged a program fee for fall and winter sessions. So regardless of, you're a first year, you're a transfer student, whatever, you're always charged the flat program fee. And then if you are taking 3.5 full credit equivalents or less, you may be eligible for course fees. Now, some of you might be asking yourselves, well, why would I enroll in less courses? Depending on what obligations you have, maybe there are students here who have to work or have other obligations they want to balance, and so that would be one reason to consider taking a smaller course load and paying per course. Academic and financial deadlines are very different. The financial deadlines that you need to meet in order to be eligible for course fees happen very early in the terms. So if this is something that you think you might be interested in, I would say email us and we can send you the details where you can read more. I'm happy to meet with students to have conversations about this. But in general, like I said, most students will be in program fees, taking 5 full credit equivalents in their first year, and so then the course fees wouldn't be relevant to you. So there's 3 types of registration status that you will see or could see on Acorn. So right now, if you log into Acorn, everyone will have we call it an invite status. It means invited to register, invited to enroll in courses. Once you enroll in courses and then you pay your minimum balance to register, or you defer if you have OSAP or out-of-province aid or a major award, that is what actually triggers you to be registered. Yeah, so that's how you would actually get registered. Both are important pieces. So enroll in courses and then you get registered. And I have more slides with details about getting registered specifically. And then finally, the one status that you could see is if you're FINCA'd, so that means financially canceled. If you fail to make payment or you fail to click the defer button, you could be financially canceled and removed from your courses. The faculty always sends lots of reminders to students when we get close to that deadline. I send emails to students. And so if you ever get an email and you're like, I don't know what this means, just reach out to us and ask, and we can clarify. The other time that you will see a FINCA status is like in the summertime. If you don't enroll in courses, you're always invited to register for summer, and then you don't enroll in courses, you will eventually get FINCA'd, and that's totally normal. So these are the financial items that will be available on Acorn for you. So first and foremost is your invoice. So invoices are not mailed to students. They are only available on Acorn. Tax documents, so when it comes time to filing your taxes for 2025, you will see those tax documents in Acorn. That normally it's around end of February of 2026 is when you'll be able to access those documents. Direct deposit is important. If you ever have a credit on your account, by adding direct deposit information, it just allows you to get a refund more quickly, more easily. I've seen checks, get lost in the mail, and then there's a whole process to stop the payment, and it's a hassle. So I always recommend to students to just add your bank information now so that it's on file in case you ever have a credit on your account. Acorn is also where you'll be able to request a deferral. So if you have OSAP, if you have out-of-province aid or a major award, you'll be able to defer your fees based on that in Acorn. And then finally, confirmation of enrollment for RESPs. Those will be available on Acorn as well. Depending on the timing of when you need this, what is available on Acorn may or may not be sufficient. So if the document that's available on Acorn isn't good enough, you can always just email us at registrar.innis, and we're able to produce letters or fill out specific forms if the company that your RESP is with requires that form filled out. So on your invoice, there's your formal costs for university. So there's tuition, there's your incidental fees, there's your auxiliary fees, and then your residence fees if applicable. And then informal costs are not on your invoice, and that could be rent, that could be transit, books, food, and we're going to talk about those two buckets of costs later in the presentation. So I talked about, this morning my colleagues talked about enrolling in courses, so that part is done. Now we're gonna talk about getting registered. So the first way, I guess probably the primary way students get registered is by making a payment from within Canada. And you can do that by adding the University of Toronto as a payee in your bank account, or I guess possibly like a parent's bank account. It's just like you would pay your cell phone bill or your credit card bill. The most important thing I wanna draw, can I get this? Where it's highlighted yellow there, the rosy account, that's your account number. So if you're adding the University of Toronto as a payee and then your account number, you would just, the only places is located is on your invoice. You would just copy that, it's normally 5 letters of your last name and your student number, and that's the account that you pay to. You can also print your invoice and take it to a bank and pay in person if you're more comfortable with that. You can also pay by credit card on Acorn. I don't recommend it. There's like a 2.5% service fee in order to do so, and I think it's like very unlikely that any sort of points you or your parent might get will outweigh that 2.5% service charge. So like I don't recommend it unless it's absolutely necessary. Acorn is also a little bit confusing because if you click on Acorn, like make a payment, I think it automatically takes you to that credit card page. So just like don't do that. I would just pay through your bank just like you would pay any other bill, and that way you don't have to pay that convenience charge. Any questions about that? No? Okay. So for students who are making a payment from outside of Canada, the university uses Convera and Flywire. The only thing I'll say about this is that it can take longer to process those kinds of payments, because there's just like more places that it needs to go through. So just, I would say like give yourself like lots of time. Like I would say like at least 2 weeks to make that payment, versus with a Canadian bank, like typically I see processing times of like anywhere from like 3 to 5 business days, so this can potentially take a little bit longer. The other thing I sometimes see with international students is like the parent is sending the money to the child and then the child's making the payment, and that can also take a little bit of time. So just make sure that you account for that when it comes to payment deadlines. And then don't pay more than your tuition. Whatever's on your invoice, don't pay more than that, because it can cause issues when it comes time to like getting that money back. You just pay what is actually on your invoice. So another way to get registered is if you have OSAP or out-of-province aid or a major award. A major award is defined as an award of value that is more than your minimum payment on your invoice, which will be available July 14th. And you'll be able to do either on Acorn. If for some reason you're running into issues, especially with like the major awards, if you think you're eligible and it's not letting you, we can also do it manually. So I would say just reach out to us if you think you're eligible, whether it's through OSAP or other aid or an award, and we can help you sort that out. So I have a few slides now about the various resources that you may have available to you while you're here at the university, and I'm going to spend time on each resource. So the first thing I want to talk about is either family support or your personal savings. So possibly you have saved up money to come to school, or maybe some of you are going to be working this summer and you're saving up. Maybe your parents have like an account for you. Maybe you have an RESP that's set up in your name or in the family name that you're going to be drawing from. Maybe your parent is going to give you a chunk of money at the beginning of the year, and they're going to say, you're going to do with this what you will, like you're responsible for managing it. Or maybe a parent is going to give you X amount per month, like, okay, we're going to cover your food. We'll give you $400 or $450 a month. I think the main thing I want to say about support with family is just to like talk about it now. Be really clear with one another, like what the expectations are, like for you as a parent that you have of your child, and you as a child you have as your parent. And I think like build a plan now so that there's no surprises, or like less likely for there to be surprises down the road. So OSAP is a federal provincial financial aid program for students attending post-secondary school. You do need to be a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident, or a protected person. It has an Ontario residency requirement, so you have to have lived in Ontario for at least 12 consecutive months without attending full-time post-secondary school in order to be eligible. There are some edge exceptions to this, so I don't know if we have any Americans who have dual citizenship here with us today, but if we do, if you are a Canadian citizen, like you are eligible for funding somewhere in Canada. Sometimes we need to figure out what province that is. Like if your parents last lived in I don't know, BC, then you might actually apply for BC student aid. But again, if you're PR Canadian, you are eligible for funding somewhere. And if you're not sure where that is, you can always email us and we can help you figure out what province you should be applying to. These applications are managed by the University Registrar's office, so they're the ones who actually accept the application and can like make changes to your application and answer really specific questions. I get summary information, so like I can see some details, but I can't like actually access your application. I had OSAP as a student, and obviously due to the nature of my job, I'm very familiar with OSAP, so I can answer some questions. I can like help you interpret messages that you might get from OSAP. And so if you ever have questions, like please just reach out to ask us. And you know, sometimes we might be able to answer that question, or sometimes we may direct you to the University Registrar's office. Applications are open now. You should apply now. And I would say like everybody should apply. Like if you're a Canadian citizen, you're a permanent resident, just apply. Like there are loans, there are grants, and even if you're not sure whether or not you qualify, like you can always stop the application at any point before like money has flowed. And even if money has flowed, you know, there is a process of like being able to cancel that. It's just more onerous. So maybe don't let it get that far. But yes, apply, and then you can see like what funding you might be eligible for. So like I said, OSAP can be made up of grants and loans. So like I do see students who get all loans. I see students who get a mix of loans and grants. It could theoretically also be all grants depending on your situation. OSAP is interest-free while you're in school. So as long as you're not off school, like full-time study for more than 6 months, your loans remain interest-free. So like if you're off in the summertime and then you come back in September, as long as you have OSAP again, or you tell OSAP like, hey, I'm a student again, then it remains interest-free. And federal loans are actually now interest-free on an ongoing basis. So even for students who have finished school, they just are paying the principal for the federal portion. There is interest on the Ontario portion. Once you're done school, it's prime plus like 1%. So it's like low right now because prime is low. And OSAP is largely based on parental income, on your course load, and where you live during the school year. So if you live with your parents, you're gonna qualify for less than if you live away from home. OSAP is always directed to your fees, your U of T fees first. And so depending on your situation, like if you're paying for your fees, you're paying for residence, most likely you're not gonna get any OSAP directed to you. No matter how much OSAP you're getting, it's all gonna go most likely to U of T directly. And then if you still owe a bit of money like for the fall term, then it's your responsibility to pay for the difference. And then again, the money flows in the winter term. And the winter money is normally a little bit less. OSAP is a little bit more front loaded, so it's normally a 60%, 40% split. In terms of what you get in the fall and what you get in the winter. So that's how that works. And like I already said, like if you're not sure what you should do, you should just apply. And again, you can continue with the application once you see what the estimate is, or you can stop with the application. There are also a few like appeals that you can file if needed. So like sometimes I have students whose parent like lost a job and maybe their 2024 income was like really good, and now in 2025 like they don't have a job. There are appeals for that sort of thing. So if you feel like you have some sort of special circumstances and like you're just not sure, you can always reach out. Again, I'm very familiar with this stuff because like this is what I do. It's way easier for me to find a form than you, I would say. So if you're in doubt, just reach out. So I'm not sure if we have any students from another province, but if we do, there's out of province funding. So it has to do with like where you live right now. So if you're from, again, BC, or maybe you're from Quebec, then you would be applying for aid from that province. I would say apply now. Application processing can take time. It's like a little bit more clunky because our university registrar's office doesn't have the same access and systems as we do with OSAP. And so it's just like a more manual process. The Euro does have a out of province request portal where like you can put in requests for like certain forms to be filled out. And by using that portal, that's how your ACORN fee deferral is also activated. And so again, you have access to this. If you have questions, you can contact the university registrar's office through their portal. I'm less familiar with out-of-province loans, but if you are having issues, I'm happy to try to help you sort that out. So UTAPS is a U of T grant that covers unmet financial need. It is a grant, so it does not need to be repaid. Students do need to be Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or protected people to be eligible. And you do have to be receiving OSAP, out-of-province funding, or Indigenous funding to be eligible. This is a program that's, again, managed by the University Registrar's Office. If you are applying for financial aid, like from OSAP or another province or what have you, you need to apply for this. This is free money. You don't have to pay it back. And it is in your best interest to apply. And later on, I'm going to talk a little bit about our Innis grant program, which is also meant for unmet need. And one of the things that I look for is that you have at least applied to UTAPS. If you don't get any money, that's fine, but we want to see you making use of all the resources you have available to you. What I typically recommend is that when you apply for OSAP, you also apply for UTAPS. Now, I think some of you probably have already applied for UTAPS because I think the university was sending emails about UTAPS, and so maybe you've already done that. So if you have done that, then don't forget to also apply for OSAP because, again, those two things are required. But if you haven't done this yet, then just apply for OSAP and then also apply for this. The reason I'm suggesting that is because UTAPS is basically a truncated OSAP application. They're asking for a lot of the same information. Sometimes I have students who apply for UTAPS later and then the numbers don't match and it can cause issues. So in order to avoid that, I just say apply for both things, one right after the other, and then everything should match. We recommend applying by 16 April. That's because for students with OSAP, if you meet this early deadline, then you could potentially have money as soon as October under this program. For out-of-province students, because it's a more manual review, if you meet the early deadline, which is technically a little bit later than this, but we're just going to use September 16th just to keep it nice and easy, then you would get money in December. So here at Innis, we have a few awards and grants that I want to highlight. So for the awards, I have them separated into two buckets. So we have awards that are for automatic consideration, and then we have awards that require you to take action, which means submitting an application. So our automatic consideration awards are largely for academic merit. I run that process every fall. It's for students who have passed 5, 10, 15 full credit equivalents. So typically, you would be considered at the end of your first, second, third year. That's how it's meant to work. And for students who have a CGPA of 3.7 or higher, you're automatically considered for these awards. You don't need to do anything. The awards are fairly small in value. They're around $400 was the average award last year. So, it's still great, but they're not huge awards. Then we have awards that require applications. Those are mostly for some sort of leadership contribution, volunteer contribution. We have a couple awards that are around identity for Black students or Indigenous students. And those applications are available starting usually in mid-February with early to mid-April deadline. So I would say if you're doing any sort of extra stuff while you're here, whether it be at Innis or at the university or even in your external community, if in your first year you're making these contributions, then I would say it's worth it to put the time into applying because we have a whole bunch of these awards that go to both returning students and to graduating students. So we also have an Innis grant program that's meant for students with financial need. Typically, we will consider students who have OSAP, or out-of-province aid, have at least applied to UTAPS, or if you have some sort of emergency. Those are the typical situations where we consider you. The application is available on ACORN starting October the 1st, and basically the application comes to me. I will send you an email. We set up a time to chat about it. It's relatively informal. And so that would be another way to get some extra money if you have unmet need. If you have enough money to cover all your stuff, then you likely wouldn't be eligible for a grant. It's just we have a limited pool of money, so it's meant to be like, oh, I can't pay my rent this month, or I can't pay my food. That's what the grant is meant for. But if you're ever uncertain that you think like maybe I should qualify or I'm not sure, then you can just email me and we can chat about it. So the university has a tool called Award Explorer, which I have on the next slide, a screenshot of it so you can see it. And it's a place to look for awards across the whole university. And I'm not going to say any more about it because I have more information on the next screen. And then lastly, please review our monthly Registrar newsletter. So my friend and colleague Dryden, she spends a lot of time on our Registrar newsletter, and we have a financial aid and awards section on that newsletter. And so we try to highlight like the big things. The University Registrar's Office runs an in-course award process where there's like a whole bunch of awards. You do one application to be considered for a bunch of different things. Those are the kinds of things that we highlight there, or if we're highlighting our own awards or what have you. So if this is something that you're interested in, I would say like when you get that newsletter, at least you should read the whole thing, but if you're interested in money stuff, please at least skim that section. So this is a screenshot of what Award Explorer looks like. So it's a faceted search, and I've filled out some information on the top. So I've put Innis as the faculty college. Award type, most likely you should be picking in-course. In-course means you're a returning student, you're a student now, and you'll be a student returning in the in the following year. Citizenship, I've set it to domestic, but there's also open to international students. For nature of award, I typically recommend you just leave it to all, because there's 8 or 9 different things that you can select, but there are a bunch of awards that are across multiple categories. So if you start playing with the filters, then you might end up looking at the same thing multiple times. So that's why I typically recommend to do all, but of course you're welcome to apply a filter there as well. And then for application required, I put yes. You could leave it as any of them, but the ones that you don't need to do anything for, you're automatically considered. So if you're going to spend your time on anything, I would say look at the ones that actually require you to take action. Every single entry should have a link with you learn more or yes, apply, and it takes you to the application. If you see any wonky dates in the application deadline section, like a date that's 2020, just ignore it. It's really cumbersome for administrators to update these dates. So I would say just click on the link, and that will take you to the page that should hopefully have the actual deadline for you to apply. And then again, each award has their own criteria. So it does mean going through them all one by one to see is there something I can actually apply for. You can see here, in this case, for this student, there's 320 awards, which means there's literally 320 entries. So it is a bit of work to go through them all one by one. But if you're looking for opportunities to apply for, I would say this is something that I would spend some time looking at. And you can also export it to PDF if you want to do it in chunks, if you don't want to sit and look at all 320 at once. Okay, so there's 2 awards I want to draw your attention to. The first is a new award. It's an Innis admission scholarship for Black students worth $500. Basically, any student, any first-year Black student is eligible for that award. You just need to fill out that form so I know who you are. So that's what that QR code is for. So if you self-identify as Black, then you should definitely fill that form out. I've set the deadline for August the 29th. And then the second one is our Innis Admission Scholarship for Indigenous peoples, also worth $500. It's for Indigenous students, either First Nations, Inuit, or Métis entering their first year. For those of you who, if you self-identified on UAC as Indigenous, then you're already captured in my pool. But if for some reason you didn't want to, or you didn't realize, you can also email us to be eligible for an award. For that, you just email us at registrar.innis@utoronto.ca so that I can include you in our pool of recipients. So some of you might be considering part-time work. In general, we recommend students don't work in their first year. There's a lot of change going on. Some of you might be commuting a ways. Some of you might be living away from home for the first time. Obviously, you're in a new academic environment. There's just a lot of transition going on. So as a very broad statement, I would say don't work in your first year. You have enough going on. But maybe you have to work, or maybe you have a job that you've been doing and you're going to be able to continue doing it while you're in school. So I've just, when you're making your timetable, consider, when you're Committing to work hours, look at your timetable, look at your commuting schedule, consider your other obligations. There is a job board offered by the university. It's called CLNX, which the link is at the bottom, and these slides will be available online, so you'll have access to all the links. There are internal and external partners on that job board, and then I'll just do a plug for work study. These are on-campus jobs. The postings will be available August 14th. I think work study is a great program because then you're gonna have supervisors who work at the university who are familiar that there's going to be periods of time when you're busy, right? You have midterms, you have finals. You're not going to be able to work as frequently during those like high stress periods. And I would say we're probably a little bit more understanding of your schedule than like you're working at like McDonald's or whatever, where like your schedule is your schedule and it's a little bit harder to adjust. So if that's something you're interested in, please check out those applications. One sec. I would say first years are maybe a little less likely to get work study positions. That's not to say that you shouldn't apply. I'm not saying that at all. It's just typically, you know, speaking as someone who hires some work study positions in the registrar's office, we're usually looking for students who have like a little bit of U of T experience under their belt. So if this is something you're interested in this year or next year, this is where you access the applications. And the only other thing I want to say is that if you are applying to something, earlier is better. It might say that there's a deadline of like, I think the latest deadline is like, it's near the end of September, but jobs fill up as qualified students are found. So if you are really serious about looking for work, it's always better to apply sooner than later. Sorry, question? Oh, okay, okay. So you might be considering other loans. I would say the main other type of loan would be a student line of credit from a Canadian bank if needed. Usually with these lines of credits, there's fewer rules. So like, you know, you don't have academic progress requirements like OSAP has. But you, like, unless you have regular steady income, most likely you will need a cosigner, which typically means a parent or a caregiver co-signing with you. You should always shop around for the best interest rate when you're looking at this kind of financial product. So, you know, I wouldn't just go to your bank, I would go to another bank. International students should check with their financial institutions from your home country if you're looking at a loan. I want to say, I don't think they can get lines of credit, but that's something to spend the time now in the summertime looking into. Hopefully you don't need to get a line of credit, but sometimes I see students whose like their parent income is just like too high for OSAP and maybe they need like just like a little bit extra of a buffer. And so that would be one reason why I might suggest looking into a line of credit. Okay, so now the fun stuff. I'm gonna spend a few slides just talking about budgeting. So I really want to emphasize that think about budgeting as a guide, not as a restriction. You want to have a plan for your year of like what things could look like. And by having a plan in advance, hopefully that means that there won't be any big surprises once you're here, big financial surprises anyways. So the two things you want to consider are both your fixed and variable costs, which I will talk a little bit about. It's important to budget for entertainment. Like you're here, you're going to be going out with friends, you're going to go to movies, you're going to go out for dinner. Like, so it's important to think about that when you're building your budget. There are so many free budgeting tools out there, spreadsheets. I have one that I can send to you if that's what you're interested in. I personally pay for budgeting software because that's what works for me. So there's like lots of things out there that you can do if this is something that you're interested in. And there's ways of budgeting that are like tracking every single dollar, and then there's ways of budgeting that maybe aren't so onerous. And if you ever want to talk about that or you want to make a plan this summer, I'm happy to meet with you. Just send an email and we can set something up. So a few of your fixed costs, tuition, obviously, it's a set amount, your residence fees if you're in residence, or your rent if you're renting, if you're buying a meal plan, that would be a fixed cost. These are all things that like the price is the price and that's not going to change. And then we have your variable costs. I would say out of all of these, the food is the one where I see like a huge variance in what students spend. And on I think it's the next slide, I have some like averages or like, I think like, let's call them like goals of what to spend in some of these categories. But yeah, I see students who tell me they spend $200 a month, which is like $50 a week, which I would say is like not a lot of money, to I've had students tell me they're spending $1,000 a month on food. What you spend is totally up to you and obviously depends on your budget. And if you have the money to spend, you know, to get Uber Eats all the time, then like awesome. Like if that's what you want to do, that's great. But maybe you don't. And so this is one area where you can really like bring it down if needed. maybe you need clothes. Again, I mentioned spending money on entertainment. I'm assuming a lot of you are going to have to pay for laundry if you're in the residence or you're, renting somewhere where maybe there is no laundry on site. That's something to consider. And then your transit costs if you're commuting, or even just transit costs while you're in the city. Transit costs could also be a fixed cost depending on like if you're commuting in from, let's say, like the wider GTA and you're taking the GO train, and like the set price is the set price. So these are all different things to think about. And if you do want the budget for me, like I have all these categories laid out. So sometimes it helps to look at these sample budgets to get you thinking about what different things cost. Actually, I did a different presentation about money for current students, and the government of Canada has a really good budgeting tool that like has so many different categories. And so I would recommend using that if you are interested in like creating a budget from scratch. And you also have the ability to download that to Excel. And if you want that and you can't find it, email me and I can send it to you. So these are some estimates. These are what I would say are like some reasonable estimates of what to spend. Food, I think like around $100 a week if you're mostly grocery shopping, I think is like a reasonable goal. I think you can eat relatively well. I know I saw a survey from students done on campus, and actually $100 a week was the number that I saw on that survey. So I feel comfortable saying like around $450 a month is a reasonable amount of food. Obviously, if you're eating out a whole bunch, you're gonna go above that. So if you're trying to rein in costs, again, food is an area where you can do that. You might have personal care or health costs, so take those into consideration. Cell phone, again, I see a wide variance. I talked about this in the presentation last year. Like this is one area where I needed to switch plans. I finally did it. It was very onerous, but now I'm spending under $40 a month for my phone as opposed to before it was like $90. So if you own your phone outright, you can find plans that are like sub $50, and you should just bite the bullet and do it because you can save a lot of money there. Books, I see a really wide range of spending on books. Some students tell me they don't spend anything on books. I don't know how they're doing that. I don't ask too many questions. I think sometimes profs, they don't require the textbook, or they provide the students the resources on Quarkus. Sometimes students are like, I want to buy my books before class. I would say wait and maybe go to class first and see what the professor says. They might have a textbook listed in the syllabus, but maybe it's not really required, or maybe you can take it out from the library. Like there are lots of options there. Transportation, like if you're living downtown, if you're in res, like I think around $100 a month, like at most is reasonable. The city's very walkable. It's very bikeable. I bike year round. Donald bikes year round. Dryden bikes year round. Like it's doable if you are into biking and you can just dress appropriately. So think about that. But if you're commuting in on the GO train, like it will be much more expensive. You can get a student ID when it comes to TTC. I think there's a student category for GO train as well. So those are ways that you can possibly like reduce some of those costs. And then it's the city, it's Toronto. There's lots of free stuff that you can do, hang out with friends. You don't always have to be going out and spending money. There's lots of stuff to do on campus. I know Dryden always likes to say when she was a student, she'd go to events, there'd be food, and it's a great way to like, I'm gonna get some pizza today or whatever. So there's lots of stuff going on campus and off campus, and take advantage. Okay, so I think this is my last slide of like actual information. August 12th is the deadline to pay your minimum payment or defer based on OSAP out of province, or if you have a major award. So like that deadline is really important. So you're gonna enroll in courses in July, and then July 14th, your invoice is gonna be available, and then you're going to make your minimum payment, which will be listed on your invoice. You are going to defer based on OSAP or out of province or major award. And the only other thing I wanna highlight is that the residence fees usually go on after the tuition fees, right? Around August. So you need to look at your invoice again if you're in residence. You're gonna see one number in mid-July once it's published, and then if you're in residence, you're gonna see another number later. So it's just important that you check that and make sure that you've paid all your fall fees by the appropriate deadline. So if you've triggered registration, whether you've deferred based on OSAP or out of province aid, or you paid your minimum payment to register, then September 30th is your next deadline. So anything that's left over for the fall term specifically has to be paid by then. Acorn is a clunky thing. It will not tell you what your fall balance is. You will have to get a calculator or Excel, and you're gonna have to add it all up. It's annoying. I understand. You can email me. I can check that for you, but I will also be doing that same thing. If you want to double check and make sure that you've paid everything, you can always email us and we can help. Assuming that you registered based on making a payment, then 30 November is the deadline to pay your winter fees. So that's going to be the next deadline that you're working towards. If you have OSAP or out of province aid, then your deadline to pay winter fees is actually January 31st. And then if you have a major award and you deferred based on that, then your deadline is April 30th. I'm sorry that there's so many dates. It's just, it is what it is. Yeah.
Worth noting that if you're in residence, September 30th and November 30th are also the residence deadlines in the first semester.
Right, for anything on your invoice. But if you have a deferral, then those deadlines still, yeah. So basically whatever's on your invoice, like these dates apply. So I am here. I'm here to help you. I like talking about money. It is of interest to me. So if you want to talk about your finances, if you want help building a budget, if you need help interpreting OSAP rules and procedures, if you have unmet need or you have some sort of financial emergency, just email. I hope that I'm pleasant to work with. I think I am. And I'm happy to talk about that with you one-on-one. The University Registrar's Office can assist with specific OSAP or out of province or US student aid or UTAP's inquiries. And the only other thing I want to say about OSAP specifically is if you do apply for OSAP, there is a message center in there where you can see updates. The University Registrar's Office will send you a message. I think you might get an email saying there's a message there and then you have to go see it. So just make sure you're checking your message center for information. You know, sometimes students have to do extra forms. If you have a parent who has foreign income, that's something that there's like an extra hoop you have to jump through. So just make sure you're checking your message center. If you get a message that you're like, I don't understand what that means, send me a screenshot. I have colleagues who work at the University Registrar's Office, so if I have a question about something that I can't answer, I can always ask them and be the middle person there. Okay, so that's it for the formal part of my presentation. Does anyone have a question that you want to ask me now? Otherwise, I can always be out in the hall for a few minutes if you want to ask me privately, or like I said, you can just email me. We're working next week, so we're around. I can answer questions over email as well. Okay, thanks everybody.